Callum didn't recognize the number, which usually meant it was scam callers, and he hated dealing with those, even if all he had to do was refuse and end the call. He took a sharp breath and answered. "Callum, brother," came a voice from the other end of the line. Callum sighed, flooded with relief. "Junior, you got a new number or something?" Yeah, a new phone. Listen, stick the kettle on, brother. I'm coming over." A pedestrian crossing beeped in the background. "Sure thing. It'll be good to catch up." Callum got to his feet and wandered into the kitchen. Yeah, I've got some news." Callum clicked the kettle lever. "Well, the water's boiling, man." "Perfect. See you in 5." And he hung up before Callum could say anything else. Callum set out 2 mugs and dropped a tea bag in each. The kettle hissed and bubbled for a while before clicking off. Callum poured both mugs, leaving space for milk, and sat at the kitchen table, waiting and watching the front door. It had been about 5 minutes since Junior had called, maybe a little longer, but he hadn't arrived yet. Nor did he after 10, 20, or 30 minutes. Callum pulled up his phone and sent a text that simply read, "You good?" to Junior's new number. But he received no reply, not even another half an hour later. So Callum called. Junior didn't answer. By now, Callum had finished his tea and was pacing around the kitchen table where Junior's drink had gone cold. Unsure what to do, he called again. And again, leaving smaller gaps of time between tries until he was chain calling. Once he'd stopped, his call log reported 15 outgoing calls. No answers, no messages. Callum sat back down and fixated on the pallid tea across from him. It wasn't far to Junior's flat, about 10 minutes. If he was at the crossing when he called, then he was halfway. Had there been an accident? Was Junior caught up in it? Callum hadn't heard any wails of police cars or ambulances near or far. Maybe a friend or family member of his had an emergency and Junior needed to bail. It happens. But no message or response at all, even if it was just to tell him to shut up. Callum was drumming his fingers against the tabletop and chewing on his tongue. He got up and started peering out of the windows for any sign of Junior or incidents. Best he could see, everything was moving normally for this time of day. It was possible Junior was waiting quietly outside, if unlikely. Callum left the flat to stand on the walkway balcony. Cars rumbled by, not far away, as he leant on the railing and peered down to the block door, but saw only pigeons in the courtyard below. The sound of laughter hooked his attention towards the stairwell on his floor. 2 ladies he'd seen often were standing by the railing on the opposite side, cigarettes in hand, and chatting loudly enough to echo. Whatever they were talking about, it sounded like gossip. Callum hurried over to them. One of the 2 side-eyed him as he approached, then pointed to his bare feet. "The floor not cold enough or something?" He glanced down and let out an amused sigh. "Nah, it doesn't bother me." "You're crazy, child." Callum hadn't thought of himself as a child for over 10 years now, for these women must have been double his age or more. "Sorry," he said, "I don't mean to bother you. But you haven't seen a guy come past here, about my age, a little taller than me, probably wearing a beanie of sorts?" They were both narrowing their eyes now, listening. "He might have been headed to 37, and Callum pointed to his side of the courtyard, where his flat door was open. The one who'd ribbed him about his feet was leaning back, her elbow on the railing. "Is that a friend of yours?" Callum nodded. "He was supposed to be dropping by over an hour ago, but I haven't heard anything from him." She glanced between Callum and the block door below. "Nobody's come by. Not coming into the building, anyhow." Callum's brow dropped. "Nobody?" "Sorry, hon. If we see him, we'll let him know you're looking." "Thanks." Callum dragged his feet back to the flat and pushed the door closed behind him. He leant back against it and, after staring into the middle distance for a moment, he muttered, "Junior, where are you, man?" To take his mind off of it, he made another cup of tea, put the TV on, stared into space, and after all that, only 20 minutes had passed. Callum kept wondering whether he should call the police or the non-emergency line, but something stopped him. Was Junior technically missing? After all, Callum hadn't looked. Junior could have been back at his flat or chatting with a friend in the street. He did say he had news. It could even be a problem with his new phone or the new SIM card. For thoroughness, Callum found and called Junior's old number. It rang for a while. Then, as Callum was pulling the phone from his ear, the line connected. "Hello? Junior?" Nobody replied. The only sound he could hear was a soft whistle growing in pitch. It had a warbling quality to it that reminded Callum of singing water bowls. "Hello?" No response came. After a few more seconds of whistling, the call stopped. Callum dialed again, 2, 3, 4 more times, but each time was the same, no matter what he said. At a loss, he tried looking it up online, but with no understanding of what was really happening, the results meant little to him. Whatever had happened, he thought, it had been something, which was more than the nothing he'd received over the last 2 hours. He got up and changed out of his vest and shorts and into joggers, a shirt and hoodie, put some shoes on this time, and with his wallet, keys and phone, he left the flat and locked up. The smoking ladies gave him a nod as he passed, and he descended the stairs. After making his way onto the street, he walked the route to Junior's block, keeping his eyes open for any disturbances or for Junior himself. There were cafes, corner shops, and fast food outlets between here and there, so Callum scanned the occupants of each as he passed, quick as he could. Along the way, he came by the crossing he'd heard on the other end of the phone, but there was no sign of Junior or any accidents having recently occurred there. Eventually, he arrived at Junior's block. It was similar to Callum's, only without the courtyard. Still, there was no sign of Junior. An insidious thought grew in Callum's head. Had he passed Junior on the way over and not realized? There were lots of people in the venues he'd seen. Junior could have been one and Callum just hadn't spotted him. He shook his head and resolved to check on the way back. Now that he was here, he climbed the stairs and found Junior's flat, 2F. He knocked and waited. He scanned the cracks and flaking paint on the doorframe for a moment before the door opened. It wasn't Junior, but Darcy, one of his flatmates. Callum had spoken to her before, but they barely knew anything about one another. A side smile crawled across Darcy's face. "Is Junior not with you?" "No. Is he not here either?" Darcy's smile faded. Last thing he said as he left was that he was going to see you. "Well, he called me on the way over, but he never showed up, so I tried ringing him and nothing." For some reason, Callum wasn't sure if he should mention the old number and the weird whistling. The thought of it made his back twitch. A breeze rolled through, and she shivered before ushering Callum inside. "I tried his old number, and it answered, but there was this sound. It wasn't him." Darcy was frowning at him as she closed the door. Callum just shook his head and waved it off. "Let's just try it and see if you can get him." Darcy led Callum into the living room and lowered the TV volume. She brought up his number and called. In the quiet, Callum could hear the dialing tone and the eventual automated voice advising Darcy to leave a message. After the beep, she said, "Hey, Junior, Callum's here, and he said you've ghosted, so call me or him, let us know you're okay. We're just concerned." As she ended the call, Callum told her about walking over and his unsuccessful search. "Right," she said. "What was it you said about his old number?" Callum ummed and erred in his attempts to explain before giving up. "Just try calling it." She did so, and as before, Callum could hear the dialing. Then it cut out, but not to voicemail. He couldn't hear it, but he knew from the confusion on Darcy's face that she was hearing it. The whistling. Darcy dressed while Callum searched Junior's room for his previous phone, calling it again to see if it would ring, but he found nothing. Either he's thrown it out, Callum said, or he's got it with him. We can ask him about it when we find him. Darcy pulled on a leather jacket as red as her hair. Good to go? Callum nodded and followed her out of the flat. As they descended to street level, he asked, "Did Junior say what the news was?" "Not that he's mentioned to me." "Has anything big changed in his life lately, like a new girlfriend or job or anything?" Darcy shrugged. "Nothing I've heard about. Whatever this news is, it's between you two." Callum puzzled over this as they walked out onto the pavement. It was hard to keep things from your flatmates at the best of times, let alone something big. As Darcy had said, this must have been something private, but he had no idea what it could have related to. Was Junior moving out? That might be something he would have hesitated about telling his current flatmates. Without any further information, it could have been anything or nothing. "I know he likes Sam's chicken," Darcy said. "We could check there." Would he really have gone at 10 in the morning? Are they even open that early? Darcy shrugged. "We can at least ask." Callum agreed, and they were soon checking every known haunt in the area. The bar he and Callum had frequented, the coffee shop Darcy had introduced him to. No matter where they searched or asked, the response was the same. "Sorry, not seen him today." As they exited a shop, something on the ground caught Callum's eye. It was slick, whatever it was, and was lying in a gutter on the intersection of a main and side street. Callum crouched down and picked up a phone with a cracked screen. "That's Junior's," Darcy said, joining him. "I don't recognize it," Callum said. "Is this his new one?" "Yeah, or it's the same model, if not literally his phone." Callum clicked the power button and the screen lit up. Sure enough, over the default new phone background, there were several notifications of missed calls, a voicemail, and messages from Darcy and himself. "Okay," Callum said, with hope peeking in his chest. "It's Junior's." Darcy stood back up and said, "So, how soon is too soon to involve the police, do you think?" Callum considered this as he handed the phone to her. His initial thought was sometime after 24 hours, but he'd heard that the first 48 hours were the most important. "Once we're sure," he said eventually. Darcy slotted the phone into her bag for safekeeping. "What are you thinking?" "We up our search and include random alleys and side streets." He glanced down the cobbled path before them that led between red brick buildings with fancy coffee shop facades. Maybe we can check the tube station a block over and any other possible route he could have taken for whatever reason. And so they did. None of the side roads yielded any results, so they asked at the underground ticket office if anyone had seen him. One of the staff even offered to check CCTV, but spotted nothing. By the time they'd finished, it was nearing 3 in the afternoon, 5 hours after last contact. They mutually checked their phones and had no messages or missed calls, which was much less likely now that they had Junior's phone. Callum and Darcy were loitering by the top of the steps to the underground, scanning the faces of passers-by. Darcy stopped and asked, "Shall we try the police?" "Yeah," Callum said. "Come on, my place is closer." And he escorted her back to his block. They reached his floor and only one of the smoking ladies remained, the one he'd spoken to earlier. She was sitting in a fold-out chair with an ashtray on her knee. "Have you seen him?" Callum asked. She shook her head, with her mouth twisted in pity. "Sorry, hun. I hope you find him." With that, she got up with her ashtray in hand and made her way into the flat. "All right," Callum said. "Thanks anyway." He led Darcy to his door and showed her in. She spotted the cold tea, now patchy and beige, sitting undisturbed on the kitchen table. Callum noticed her sigh, and he poured it out before offering her one. They sat down on either side of the table, with their beverages and phones on the tabletop. "Who should report it?" Darcy asked. I guess I was the last to hear from him. I'll do it. Callum's nerves were rattling like a stick along a metal fence as he loaded the Metropolitan Police site and found the relevant page. There was a long list of information about the process, followed by a big blue button labeled Report a Missing Person. He followed the instructions and filled out as much information as he and Darcy could recall. Junior's name, age, appearance, address, last known location, anything and everything. Once he'd submitted it, the page updated, telling him someone would be in touch within the hour. They'd been making small talk for a while, when Callum's phone rang with an unrecognized number. He answered. Hello? Hello, is this Callum Griffiths? Yeah, that's me. Hello, my name is Samantha. I'm from the Metropolitan Police, and I'm following up regarding your missing persons report. She asked further questions, mostly to confirm details or get a better picture of the events that took place and of Callum's relationship to Junior. So, she said, we'll be sending somebody around to search his address, and from there, we'll be going door to door, asking for any eyewitnesses, and we'll be checking in with local hospitals as well. Callum nodded slowly. Darcy was watching him, her hands fidgeting in her lap. A small amount of relief poured through him. For now, though, we're ranking this as a low-risk case, okay? A strange feeling sizzled in his gut. Why low risk? The guy's vanished. That doesn't mean we're not treating this seriously, or that we're not searching. It means that, from what you've told me, Junior is otherwise in sound physical and mental health and is unlikely to pose a serious danger to himself or others. The way she said it made Callum think it was either well rehearsed or she was reading from a script. He didn't know what else to say other than, okay. You said he was on his way to see you? Yeah, that's right. Then it might be a good idea to remain there, just in case he turns up. With that advice, Darcy and he exchanged numbers, and she returned home to wait for the police, while Callum stayed sitting on the sofa and watching TV. Though none of it went in, and soon he realized some game show was playing and he changed the channel in search of something more interesting. The remainder of his afternoon was defined by checking his phone and seeing nothing but the clock changing at 1 or 2 minute intervals. The monotony only eased when Darcy rang him as he was contemplating dinner. So what happened? He asked her. They searched through his room, his laptop, and his phone. Didn't find anything suspicious, or not that they told me about anyway. They also notified his family, and apparently they haven't seen him either. Callum's stomach was growling now, and he realized he hadn't eaten all day. I'm guessing you've not seen him, she said. Nope. She let out a long sigh. I hate just sitting here and doing nothing. I've barely eaten, oh my god. Well, Callum said, you could come here and we could order pizza or from a local takeaway or something. That literally sounds perfect right now. It was evening by the time she'd arrived and they'd ordered food. Crispy king dough beef for Callum, chili and salted chicken for Darcy, with special fried rice to share. They took up their positions on the sofa and found the film channel to watch while eating. The schedule said it had been playing the Resident Evil movies all day and was currently partway through the 4th installment. Afterlife, it was called. Having never seen any of the previous films, they had no context for the characters, their backstories, or the grander narrative, but they soon found themselves laughing and joking at the wooden acting, gratuitous use of slow-mo action scenes, and contextless zombified dogs with bifurcated heads full of protruding bones. They lapsed into silence as the credits rolled, and Callum felt his brows gather together and, despite having nearly half his food left, his appetite drained. A sense of regret or guilt washed over him, as though he shouldn't be laughing or having fun, considering the circumstance. A glance over at Darcy, moving food around her half-covered plate, told Callum she felt the same way. It seems rude, Darcy said, unprompted. Hanging out and laughing like nothing's wrong. Yeah, I know what you mean. They put their food aside and watched the remainder of the movies in good humor, if more subdued than before. At some point, Callum noticed Darcy had fallen asleep, curled into the arm of the sofa. He turned the light off and lowered the TV volume before finding a spare blanket to cover her. Realizing the time, he traipsed off to bed and, despite the nerves of the day, sleep came quickly. But something woke him during the night, a whistle that warbled in pitch. It was coming from the living room and, at first, was faint enough that Callum thought it was Darcy calling Junior's old number. Until it grew louder, loud enough to make Callum wince. He threw back the cover and staggered into the living room. There, Darcy was standing between the sofa and the coffee table. She had her phone in her hand, from which the screeching came. "Darcy!" Callum shouted. She turned to him, and he saw the trickle of red from her nose over her top lip. Both her phone and the TV were shining a shadowless white light from their screens. As the noise loudened, the light intensified. Callum put up his hands and shielded his eyes. The sound squeezed his head. He groaned in pain. When it all faded out, and the TV returned to playing films, Callum opened his eyes. Darcy was gone. Her food was still plated on the table, and her scarlet jacket was draped over the back of the sofa.